It won't be the last word on the Titanic, but it does bring us a step closer to the truth.
At 3,800 meters below the North Atlantic, something has shifted, not in the wreck itself, but in what we thought we knew about it. A Titanic breakthrough scan has peeled back more than a century of guesswork, speculation, and myth. What was once hidden in rust, silt, and shadow has now been captured with surgical precision. But this isn't just about technology, it's about control, and a question no one's fully answered. Who owns the remains of history's most iconic disaster? Behind one particular finding lies a quiet storm, one that could decide whether Titanic is preserved for all or lost to a handful. Something unexpected has surfaced, and it's forcing a long-overdue reckoning. A wreck awakened. In April 2025, a collaborative expedition led by deep-sea imaging specialists, Atlantic Productions, and National Geographic launched a landmark effort to digitally preserve the Titanic wreck using deep photogrammetry. This technique, never before employed at such depth or scale, involved capturing over 715,000 ultra-high-resolution images using remotely operated submersibles. The mission aimed not only to document the current state of the wreckage, but also to build an unprecedented, full-scale digital replica of the Titanic's final resting place. Operating at nearly 3,800 meters, 12,500 feet below sea level, the submersibles worked under immense pressure and total darkness, capturing every visible aspect of the wreck from multiple angles. The result is a 16-terabyte digital archive, a complete photorealistic 3D model of the shipwreck site. What distinguishes the 2025 scan is its total comprehensiveness. Previous expeditions, including those in 1985, 2010, and earlier unmanned missions, captured only partial visuals or relied heavily on sonar imaging and low-resolution footage. Earlier technology limited visibility and left vast areas of the wreck undocumented or misunderstood. The new deep photogrammetry approach overcomes these limitations by providing detailed imagery at millimeter-level precision, revealing structural elements, artifacts, and the spatial relationship between debris in ways not previously possible. Unlike past mapping attempts, this scan connects the entire site, from the still-standing bow to the crumpled stern, 600 meters apart, with no visual gaps. The digital twin assumes the role of a scientific instrument and historical archive. Forensic analysts, engineers, and maritime archaeologists can now virtually walk down and around the wreck to analyze deterioration, damage patterns, and possible failure points. One immediate advantage is the ability to revisit each aspect of the shipwreck site without physically disturbing it, a major concern because of the wreck's fragile state and ongoing decay. The model has the potential to educate and inform processes of preservation, especially at a time when physical access is contentious on account of the deterioration of the ship and the ethical aspects of repeat dives. The events of consideration for the implications of the scan do also transcend the technical horizon. It repositions the Titanic not merely as an archaeological artifact, but as a living archaeological site that may be examined in perpetuity with no further human intrusion. Is this digital twin the last intact record of the Titanic before it completely disappears into the ocean floor? Such a question becomes ever more pressing, given that key features such as the iconic bow railing have already collapsed. The wreck was reawakened with a roar, not through salvage or exploration, but through data, precision, and the careful application of modern science. But just beneath the wreck's frozen silence, the scan uncovered signs of movement, deliberate, desperate, and long overlooked. Engineering team's last moments. The 2025 deep scan of the Titanic has brought renewed attention to a part of the ship often overlooked in mainstream narratives: the engine and boiler rooms. These lower deck compartments, once hidden by darkness and deterioration, have now been digitally exposed with extraordinary clarity. For the first time, physical indicators confirm that a group of engineers and firemen remained below deck, maintaining the ship's systems as disaster unfolded. In boiler room number 2, the scan revealed metal grates bent inward, a clear sign of intense heat and pressure. These structural distortions suggest the boilers were still operational even as seawater was rushing in, a sign that someone stayed behind, actively managing the machinery during the ship's final moments. One of the most significant discoveries from the scan was a manual steam valve located at the stern, still locked in the open position. This valve, critical to powering the ship's electrical generators, had previously been assumed lost or destroyed. Its position indicates that it was intentionally opened, allowing steam to continue circulating even as the ship began to break apart. This discovery directly supports survivor accounts describing lights flickering until just before the final plunge. Many of these testimonies were once considered unreliable due to trauma and poor visibility, but the new evidence shows that the engineering crew's efforts to maintain power were real, deliberate, and effective for longer than previously believed. The metallurgical experts consulted during the expedition noted many signs of stress and burn marks on the key components, including out-of-alignment control panels and burnt wires. These are not arbitrary artifacts of damage, they are manifestations of activity under duress. The conditions in these compartments were nearly impossible for any life to persist: rising floods, scorching heat, and failing systems, but someone kept going. The physical damage today serves as forensic corroboration of the accounts of passengers who described the scene in chaotic. These findings actually bring weight to bravery, which has long been overlooked by the crew of the ship, whose names are largely missing from history books and dramatizations. While much attention over time has been given to officers' and passengers' activities above decks, this scan tells a different tale in 2025. It shows that critical systems continued to function, not by coincidence, but through a well-orchestrated and self-dedicated effort much deeper within the hull of the Titanic. These men had no realistic escape and no hope of survival. Yet they stayed at their posts, not out of duty alone, but to buy vital minutes for those above. This evidence serves not only to enhance one's understanding of the disaster, but also forces a reconsideration of just who can rightfully claim to be the true heroes of the Titanic tragedy. Titanic's electrical system exposed. The Titanic's electrical system has long been considered one of the most advanced of its time, yet until recently, much of its operation during the disaster remained speculative. The 2025 deep scan has revealed critical details about how power was maintained, even as the ship was taking on water. Central to this system were the ship's steam-driven dynamos, located deep in the hull near the boiler rooms. These generators were responsible for powering everything from the lights in first-class salons to the communication systems. The new scan provides physical evidence showing that steam continued circulating through the system well after the iceberg impact, suggesting that the electrical infrastructure remained functional far longer than previously thought. Researchers identified key components of the electrical system that had not been clearly visible in earlier missions, including heavily corroded but intact junction boxes and conduit lines. Particularly significant were traces of charred and melted wiring found in compartments close to the forward generator room. Metallurgical analysis indicates that this damage was not the result of long-term corrosion alone, but likely due to electrical arcing, an event that occurs when active circuits are disrupted under stress. This supports multiple survivor testimonies that the lights aboard the Titanic remained on until moments before the final break. An open steam valve discovered in the stern further substantiates the idea that engineers deliberately kept generators running to provide light for passengers evacuating in near-freezing darkness. The continuous flow of electrical energy has significantly enhanced the safety performance of the vessel in the effective evacuation. Brightly illuminated decks with proper visibility permitted accessibility to lifeboats and also facilitated effective communication between officials and passengers on board in case of an emergency. Early power interruption would have incidentally increased the death count. For under normal circumstances, this might have happened since it was an island effort by the engine crew to keep the electrical facility alive. Such findings counter earlier popular belief that prolonged electrical functionality was a mere passive design of the system. It further indicates deliberate manual decisions taken under extreme conditions to permit visibility for and communication with those above deck. Although the Titanic's steam and electrical systems were ultimately overcome by water, their operation during those final minutes constitutes a triumph in technology and human effort.
Nearly 4,000 metres down, in the murky depths of the Atlantic, the Titanic.
This last scan alters not only our idea of what power infrastructure meant as the Titanic foundered, it will also change the idea of such power infrastructure as mere background to tragedy as an active factor mitigating tragedy. The fact that the electrical network aboard the ship was still usable is neither an accident nor mere luck. Rather, it is the result of mechanical robustness and human willpower in this case, confirmed by the physical evidence left on the ocean floor. Forensics of Titanic's breakup. One of the most long-debated questions surrounding the Titanic disaster has been how exactly the ship broke apart. For decades, conflicting survivor testimonies and limited imaging left experts uncertain. Did it split cleanly in two, or did the structure fail in a more chaotic sequence? The 2025 deep scan now offers the most conclusive forensic evidence yet, and the results point to a complex and violent structural failure rather than a single, clean break. The high-resolution 3D model reveals signs of intense torsional stress along the ship's keel and lower decks, indicators of twisting forces acting unevenly as the ship's bow submerged and the stern lifted nearly vertical. Analysis of the new digital reconstruction shows that the breakup was not instantaneous. Instead, it was a progressive collapse that unfolded over an estimated 20 to 40 seconds. As the bow sank and the stern rose, the ship's central spine, the keel, experienced increasing tension. The scan reveals asymmetrical shearing and deformation in steel beams, bulkheads, and support structures. Deck plates buckled, gangways twisted, and hull seams fractured in a pattern consistent with corkscrew motion, suggesting the ship twisted apart under immense strain. These findings validate some of the less common survivor accounts, which describe the stern rotating as it lifted, a detail previously dismissed due to lack of supporting physical evidence.
The Titanic was simply colossal, and this 3D scan reveals the wreck in its entirety.
What's particularly important about this discovery is that it refutes earlier assumptions that the Titanic broke evenly at a midpoint near the third and fourth funnels. Instead, the scan reveals an irregular diagonal fracture line extending across multiple decks and structural layers. This has changed the understanding of the forces at play in the ship's final moments. The stern section, long considered too damaged to offer meaningful information, now emerges as key to reconstructing the sequence of events. Its contorted condition, previously seen as a result of impact with the seabed, is now understood as partially occurring during descent, a twisting, violent separation rather than a fall from a static position. This new interpretation underscores how closely the Titanic came to remaining intact, at least until reaching the ocean floor. Some marine engineers involved in the analysis speculate that if the ship had flooded more rapidly, allowing it to sink in one piece, the hull might have held together longer. Ironically, the slow flooding that gave passengers more time to escape also produced uneven stresses that led to the ship's disintegration. The digital model doesn't just illustrate how the Titanic failed, it reveals the subtle thresholds at which modern engineering, human decision-making, and physical forces collided in catastrophe. The map of devastation. The 2025 deep scan has produced the first complete, high-resolution 3D map of the Titanic's debris field, an achievement that provides new insight into the ship's disintegration and descent.
New digital scan of the Titanic has offered an unprecedented insight into the ship's final moments.
Using more than 700,000 individual images captured by submersibles, the expedition team stitched together a detailed spatial reconstruction of the wreckage, spanning from the upright bow to the twisted stern, and including the thousands of scattered items in between. This comprehensive map reveals not only what lies on the seabed, but how it got there, allowing forensic analysts to track the movement of key components during the breakup and sinking. One of the major revelations from this mapping is the clear delineation of a debris corridor, an extensive trail of objects, machinery, and structural fragments between the separated bow and stern sections, which lie approximately 600 meters apart. The orientation and distribution of this material confirm that the ship did not simply fall apart and drop to the sea floor. Instead, sections of the vessel broke away at different times and under varying forces. The stern, likely rotating as it sank, expelled much of its internal structure outward, which is evident in the chaotic spread of crushed decks, collapsed beams, and detached equipment. In contrast, the bow section appears to have descended more vertically, embedding more cleanly into the seabed, and leaving a comparatively compact impact zone. This mapped pattern of wreckage offers critical forensic clues about how the ship failed. For instance, items closer to the break site show signs of violent separation, including bent railings, compressed metal panels, and components torn from their original positions. The team also identified regions where midship sections appear to be missing entirely, either disintegrated under pressure during descent or buried deep in sediment layers. Among these potentially missing parts are structural elements near the central turbine shaft and Marconi radio room. If recovered or more clearly imaged, these could offer key evidence about the ship's final moments and internal mechanical failures. The debris map is more than a record of destruction. It is a visual narrative of Titanic's final hour. It reflects the physical path of disintegration and descent in real time, capturing how materials reacted to shifting weight, changing angles, and the immense forces of the ocean. As Titanic continues to deteriorate, this digital reconstruction may become the most accurate and lasting record of what remains. It not only preserves the layout of the wreckage for future study, but also opens the door to answering unresolved questions about how and why the ship failed the way it did. Amid the wreckage trail lies a deeper clue, one that redefines the very nature of the impact that sealed Titanic's fate. Precision of the iceberg damage. One of the most striking revelations from the 2025 digital scan is how minimal, yet devastating, the physical damage to Titanic's hull truly was.
But more than a century after the ship sank, new technology is shedding light on what happened on that fateful night.
Contrary to popular depictions of a massive, gaping hole torn by the iceberg, the scan shows that the actual breaches were thin slits running along the starboard hull. Each was only a few millimeters wide, yet collectively they spanned a length of nearly 300 feet. These slits occurred just below the waterline and sliced through 6 of the ship's forward compartments, 2 more than the vessel was engineered to withstand. This confirms that it wasn't the scale of damage that doomed the Titanic, but its precise location and distribution. The digital model allowed marine engineers to simulate how water flooded through these narrow openings, gradually overtopping the bulkheads designed to contain it. Titanic was built to remain afloat with up to 4 compartments flooded. The iceberg's impact, however, compromised 6, a critical threshold. The breach acted more like a surgical incision than blunt force trauma, undermining the ship's buoyancy in a slow, unstoppable cascade. Water advanced in an orderly but relentless fashion, giving the illusion of time while ensuring eventual catastrophe. The precision of this failure is particularly haunting. A breach just a few feet further aft might have spared additional compartments, possibly keeping the ship afloat long enough for rescue. This forensic clarity puts long-standing questions about construction back into focus. Were the steel plates too brittle in the cold? Were the rivets flawed? While these concerns remain open to further investigation, the scan reveals that the nature of the impact itself, fine, overlapping slits instead of one large tear, was more than enough to sink the ship under the known design constraints. These details suggest Titanic was undone not by a catastrophic blow, but by a chain reaction that exploited its structural limits with surgical precision. In this light, the disaster was not the result of dramatic destruction, but of a slow, engineered unraveling. The implications of this analysis extend beyond Titanic. It serves as a case study in how small structural compromises, if distributed across critical areas, can have far-reaching consequences. It also reinforces how close the ship came to survival. Had the iceberg struck slightly higher, lower, or further back, the results may have been different. The 2025 digital reconstruction doesn't just correct misconceptions, it raises sobering questions about how fragile even the most advanced engineering can be when faced with precision failure under the wrong conditions. Personal artifacts frozen in time. Among the most haunting revelations from the 2025 deep scan are the personal artifacts captured within the debris field, objects that, until now, had remained hidden beneath rust, silt, and darkness. For the first time, luggage trunks, collapsed bunk beds, furniture pieces, and even railings frozen mid-fall have been documented in extraordinary detail. These remnants are not just archaeological evidence, they are silent witnesses to human experiences during Titanic's final moments. Unlike machinery or structure, these items speak directly to the lives once aboard. Passengers and crew who left behind no voice, only what they carried or touched in their last hours. The scan identified several sections of crew quarters and passenger areas, including what appears to be a collapsed sleeping berth, with personal belongings still clumped together. Some researchers believe the arrangement of these artifacts may help determine who was likely in those spaces and when. The fact that some items remain relatively undisturbed, protected by bulkheads or trapped within collapsed compartments, provides a rare opportunity to piece together the likely movements of individuals during the sinking. Were these areas occupied at the time the ship broke apart? The placement and condition of these personal items may offer answers, or at least suggest timelines of abandonment, evacuation, or entrapment. While the ship's physical failure has long been the focus of forensic studies, the emotional impact of these personal artifacts should not be understated. A leather suitcase intact after more than a century, a twisted bed frame embedded in silt, or a portion of staircase railing caught mid-collapse. These elements humanize the event in a way that steel and schematics cannot. They provide a direct link to the ordinary people aboard. Immigrants seeking new lives, workers serving under dangerous conditions, families divided in the chaos. These objects become, in essence, non-verbal records of choices, habits, and final positions made in moments of panic or courage. Importantly, these findings challenge the idea that all meaningful artifacts have already been recovered or catalogued. Many of these items were not looted, salvaged, or put on display. They've remained untouched, unseen, and preserved only by the deep-sea environment. Now digitized, they can be studied and interpreted without the ethical complications of physical removal. As Titanic continues to deteriorate, this digital preservation of personal spaces and belongings may be the final opportunity to document these hidden human stories. In doing so, the 2025 scan has added a new layer of meaning to the Titanic's legacy, one that is less about technology and more about memory. Legends confirmed by steel. The 2025 deep scan of Titanic has provided physical evidence that challenges, confirms, or reinterprets many long-standing legends surrounding the ship's final hours.
A digital scan created from more than 700,000 underwater images now shows us the complete wreck.
Survivor testimonies, over a century old, have often been disputed due to inconsistencies or dramatization in retellings. However, with new millimeter-precise imaging of the wreck, certain details once dismissed as myth are now being re-evaluated as fact. For instance, the scan revealed intact light fixtures and scorched wiring in areas aligned with survivor accounts describing electric lights flickering until the ship's final plunge, affirming that power was indeed maintained longer than many experts previously believed. One of the most iconic stories involves the ship's band continuing to play music as chaos unfolded. Though no direct physical evidence can confirm this, the preserved structure of the first-class lounge and nearby corridors shows no signs of early collapse in those areas. This suggests these locations remained accessible until late in the sinking process, making such an act plausible. Additionally, artifacts recovered digitally from near this part of the ship, such as a fragmented music stand, offer circumstantial support to stories long viewed as romanticized. Rather than settling the matter outright, the new data lends weight to testimonies that might have otherwise remained in the realm of legend. Conversely, the scan also dispels some commonly held myths. The popular image of the Titanic being gashed open like a can by the iceberg is now definitively contradicted. The 3D model reveals thin slits, not massive tears, in the hull. Similarly, theories that the ship broke in half on the surface in a clean snap are no longer viable. Instead, the detailed mapping shows an uneven, diagonal fracture line caused by torsional forces, corroborating lesser-known survivor accounts that described the stern twisting as it rose. These corrections shift the focus from cinematic dramatization to structural realism, challenging how popular culture has portrayed the tragedy for decades. The digital reconstruction has proven that while myth and memory are valuable, they must be tested against the physical record. Some of the most dramatic stories hold up to scrutiny. Others must now be reconsidered or discarded entirely. What the scan ultimately offers is a clearer distinction between fact and fiction, enabling a more accurate historical narrative. It doesn't diminish the human drama, it anchors it in evidence. As forensic imaging confirms where myth ends and the machine tells the truth, we are left with a deeper, more grounded understanding of what truly happened aboard the Titanic. The wreck's ongoing decay. While the 2025 deep scan of the Titanic has provided unparalleled insight into the wreck's condition, it also underscores a grim reality. The ship is collapsing. One of the most visible signs of this decay is the recent collapse of the bow railing, a once iconic feature seen in countless images and documentaries. The scan shows the railing has fallen inward, likely due to a combination of metal fatigue, corrosion, and external disturbance. While natural degradation plays a large role, experts involved in the expedition point to repeated submersible contact over decades as a major contributor. Despite strict guidelines, some submersibles have brushed against or landed near fragile sections of the wreck, accelerating structural failure. The increasing accessibility of deep-sea technology has brought a surge in tourism and commercial dives to the Titanic site, an issue that marine archaeologists warn is unsustainable. Multiple documented incidents show private submersibles approaching the wreck with minimal oversight, leading to concerns over unintended contact and sediment disturbance. These activities, while often marketed as respectful tributes, may in fact be hastening the ship's destruction. The scan recorded several areas showing unnatural scraping patterns on deck surfaces, consistent with vehicle contact. Damage to ornate railing sections, steel plates, and even previously preserved artifacts is visible in the high-resolution model, raising the question of whether exploration has now become part of the problem. This conflict highlights growing tension between preservation and commercialization. On one side are those who argue that continued access, whether for tourism, education, or media, is essential to keeping Titanic's legacy alive. On the other side are experts who believe the wreck should be left undisturbed, citing its rapid deterioration and ethical concerns. The 2025 scan offers a sobering compromise, a detailed, permanent record that can replace intrusive expeditions. Yet even with the digital model available, commercial interest in physical access shows little sign of slowing. Without stricter international protections or enforcement mechanisms, the wreck may continue to suffer avoidable damage. The Titanic is no longer just a historical site, it is a fragile artifact under siege. The 2025 scan may stand as the last opportunity to preserve its full structure in digital form before more of it is lost forever. If the bow railing's fall is a symbol, it's not just of decay, but of human impact. The wreck's story now includes not only the tragedy of 1912, but also the modern dilemma of how we interact with the past. How we respond, whether with restraint or exploitation, will determine whether future generations encounter the Titanic as a preserved legacy or a cautionary tale of what we failed to protect. As the wreck faces growing threats from both nature and man, a deeper battle is emerging, one not of steel, but of ownership and legacy. Salvage, ownership, and the future of Titanic. The question of who owns the Titanic and what should be done with what remains is more urgent than ever. Since its discovery in 1985.
New exclusive photographs, by far the best yet, are in from the Titanic.
Titanic has been at the center of legal and ethical disputes concerning salvage rights and artifact recovery. Under current international maritime law, no single nation holds jurisdiction over the wreck, which lies in international waters. However, the 2001 UNESCO Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage and agreements between the US and UK have tried to regulate commercial activity around the site. Enforcement, though, remains limited, and salvage operations have continued in legal grey areas, raising ongoing concern among historians, legal scholars, and cultural heritage advocates. Hundreds of artifacts recovered from Titanic between the 1980s and early 2000s, including china, jewelry, and ship fittings, have been placed in museums or sold at auction, sparking intense debate over the commodification of tragedy. Some argue that these items preserve history and help fund exhibitions that educate the public. Others believe their removal, especially without direct archaeological oversight, disrespects a maritime grave. The 2025 scan reintroduces this debate, not by retrieving new objects, but by showcasing previously unseen items and locations through digital documentation. With this level of preservation now possible without physical disturbance, should artifact recovery continue at all? One complication is that many Titanic artifacts remain in private hands. Some have been auctioned off to collectors, and others are locked in legal battles over ownership, especially in bankruptcy proceedings involving RMS Titanic Inc., the company that held salvage rights for decades. This scattered stewardship creates challenges for preserving a cohesive historical record. It also raises ethical questions about whether significant pieces of human history should be bought and sold. With the wreck itself deteriorating rapidly and many of its items permanently separated, the digital twin created in 2025 may soon become the only intact archive of the site's original context. Looking ahead, the future of Titanic's legacy may depend less on what is taken from the ocean floor and more on what is preserved in data. The 16-terabyte 3D scan stands as a non-invasive, scientifically rigorous model that allows exploration, education, and research without further harming the site. Could this digital reconstruction replace future dives? Could it become the definitive method for preserving underwater cultural heritage? As physical preservation becomes increasingly unfeasible, the Titanic's digital twin may not just be a tool, it may be the final unified legacy of the world's most infamous maritime disaster. If this discovery changed how you see the Titanic, imagine what else is still hidden beneath the surface. Like the video if you learned something new, drop a comment with your thoughts or questions, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Tap the next video on your screen now. We're diving even deeper